Sheila here with Sirius Taurus Moon. This is Moon is 22 in Taurus, and this is Soul Hour. Sun is 18 degrees Cancer, Venus Day. Now, I think that a while ago, on my Spirit of Matter channel, when I was looking into just the beginning of political assassination prevention, and there was certain comments that I made that were an immediate reaction while I was being tortured. And they addressed the visibility of involvement in either being victim to or perpetrator of, and in certain the ritual settings basically opt to people having both positions so that they are super extortable. Now, what's done in those things, because it's affecting identity and consciousness, it can be seen visibly. Now, it is not linear in the sense that there, for example, people that look like they're still children usually were victims of such abuse that was a health development. People that look old, although they're not old, usually were abused and had like their energy taken from them. Now, to add an extra level of intricacy, because it's multiple people harmed and they take the consciousnesses of people to harm one another. Okay, because the point is kind of like to create chaos, and so it makes it all the more difficult so that people will think that somebody is doing a thing on them. Uh, and then it's like, anyway, they have to defend themselves. Very, very intricate, very, very challenging. Yair Lapid, by the way, was trying to exempt the issues or the accusations that happen around an election of someone, and I think that this is um, not suffice tending to those rituals. Um, and it's also challenging because he was to be in his position, he had to be involved in those rituals, and I don't mean consent there, because inherently those rituals are designed to create an illusion of consent so that there can be an illusion of holding people accountable. That's the core of extortion called raison d'etat. So I think that certain things that I said when I was just at a certain phase where I was tortured had affected people and could have caused responses. This is where I make this topic clearer, because people were both deprived of medical treatment, both for mental health and physical health, that is not abusive. For example, I have been prevented from dentistry that is compatible and actually not harming to me for at least half a decade. The grand population can say, well, every time your dentist assistant asks to uh, wash your mouth with fluoride, she's basically committing the same offense. Okay, we'll say maybe not to that extremity and so on, but it is still the ripple effect of the pebble drop in those similar offenses. This is where this is where the how should I say that? The junctures, now here is the thing, the junctures of those abuses, they trigger people not being able to, how should I say that? The face of the abuser becomes triggering. Now, because they use consciousnesses of people on one another, and because sexual boundary violation and torture are identity permeating practices, then the series of triggers is basically activated. Okay, so this is a video response to Emma from Mspiracy. And I think all of us have had this type of thing activated within us. And again, it is of course important. Neptune Aries is the holistic meaning of identity, face, first impression, and the I am. Okay, for example, borderline and narcissistic, what people call personalities, are basically, personality is sun, is soul, basically violation to detachment from the soul. Now, to the people that were raped and tried to access their own soul alignment, usually the only thing that they would have is red flags to narcissism, and particularly when Pluto was in Capricorn and we were climbing up the ladder of being gaslighting formed. So it had a dual effect that was both undermining us. For example, shifting the blame is taking the blame back to the perpetrator, but also the perpetrator was violated sometimes on the time when they were violating. Like I said, this is where the Pluto closing a cycle, closing sextile with Aries, is indeed a risk of humanity extinction, and that risk is real. Those things are, how should I say, they are, the whole issue was to create a superhuman, so it is challenging every single aspect of being a human. And at the same time, the need to assert our sense of self. Okay, for example, for Mspiracy, the way that those things work is that, when a person becomes aware of one aspect, then they are going to try to target the glow of the person that spoke up about it. And since as a person has already been through that phase, I kind of make a video response ahead of time. Just like when people say, oh, so and so harmed me, so and so and did that to me. And I know that a minute before that they said, hey, I saw these people and they were also harmed and they harmed me. And I know that the structure of the rituals is that they would use that person's energy to harm others. And mentioning that bigger picture is not about invalidating, it's actually validating and adding the full picture, because basically in order to prevent that person being violated again. um, and then they have the nothing means anything, which is basically the peak of the trauma, where they try to make nothing mean anything, and then on that ground try to create basically a certain reality that is fictitious. I just described timeline creations and altering. um, Moon sextiling Mercury in conjunction Lilith. Lilith in a yacht between the Moon and Mercury. And by the way, those things preceding also political assassination. And I've addressed that in the past. Um, Mars 2 meters from Aldebaran, almost conjoining Mercury of Israel. Let's take a look at the news. Now, by the way, during trauma, we indeed could have a spike of facial physiognomy, where we could suddenly see things or patterns in the face and connect them to the traumas. And we need to remember that this is a flash. It's like one frame in a 16 frame per minute film. Um, yeah, let's take a look. The local news sometimes are revealing, which is why I do look at them. Water pollutions. A lot of elderly Jews in United States feel insecure since 7th October. People being attacked and so on. I think the mechanism is similar to what I've previously mentioned. Also, when it's the other way around, let's say Palestinians that escape the genocide, or which probably in Israel we would not be notified about if they are going through violence or persecution, mainly because they can look like Jews. I mean, it's the same Semitic features. We talk about physiognomy. Lebanon is discussing the continuous Israel attacks. Oh, good things that they didn't set out the bombing in the central station in the capital city of the Negev, because I was just there today. They wanted to shoot towards a police station and have a bombing in the central station, which basically targets mostly Bedouin and Arab. I was compared to Neil the Seal. And it was like cute harassment to trafficking and at risk of extinction because of oil companies. I just killed you. No, I didn't mean to. And I'll be back in the ocean in September. I wanted to study marine biology. I begin to have a little bit of connections there. Sedna story. A story of oceanography and marine biology. Sedna. Spain. Oh, forest fire. Worst forest fire in 2 decades in Spain. Ankara sold Russian defense systems so it can purchase F-35s from United States. Economy is interesting. Remember when I was at the shout out to the Profidor. I remember when I was at the Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce, and one of the first things I learned was that Bennett, a right-wing politician, had a construction material company that sold to basically Palestine. Yeah, Lapid, that's for you. Have a little bit of sovereignty in the brotherhood. um, Netanyahu is afraid to lose the elections. Okay. London and The Hague. The games, sports. Yet another juncture of rituals. This is something. The Ministry of Taxation notified the civilians of 64 settlements in Judah and Shomron that they will be having tax benefits as of next month and retroactive since January. The Jewish Zionist Party announced that in a decision that was approved in the Israeli parliament. Now, here's the thing. Israel has a housing issue. Again, this is my argument with the Profidor. Housing is not a privileged thing to tend to. Housing is not something you say, oh, they're going to live in assisted housing. No, not. And this is another point where if all the tax benefits are allocated to people living outside of Israel, what happens if they close the border? France lended the British Museum via carpet for the first in 900 years. 900 years. Almost 1 millennia. I don't have an astrological. The first thing I think is some Sedna thing, but Sedna takes 12 millennia to surround the zodiac and has an irregular cycle. And this art is from the Middle Ages, presenting the Normannic invasion, Normannic like Normandy, in 1026, in 1066. Okay. I wonder about that. I should probably look more into that bio tapestry. And this is a Middle Ages. I don't know. I would need to study this more because it probably means a lot, but I don't know on the spot to tell you what. It can be an Aries cycle, because it can be Middle Ages. We can go back um, to the 1500s, to the 1600s. What does it mean? I don't know. Like I would need. לא כרגע, תודה. Probably two Aries cycles. On the spot, I can think about something like two Aries cycles, and this is also the 900 years. So they probably want to create some sort of a talismanic event regarding culture. To defend from invasion or to defend from inquisition. It can be some sort of astrological charity to defend from inquisition. I've addressed the scripture relevant things. What would be an astrological charity? An astrological charity is a term coined by Christopher Warnock that probably is turning in his own, not grave, numerous times when when I have my own rendition. It particularly was about Aries. Here's the difference between me and Christopher Warnock. Christopher Warnock is very telic and incredibly traditional. He's kind of holding the candle to something ancient, preserved exactly as it is. I am the antithesis of this, and and both are important. Um, and this is where, okay, then we go back to China, having a successful experiment in a system that um, retrieves missiles connected to a sea platform. Okay, basically it's after a missile was launched, they can retrieve it back. Which is hoping to break the dominance of United States with the multiple use rockets. Very fascinating. Now, this technology is very important. Remember when Israel had a fiasco with an Italian UN forces, and I said, well, the technology of Israel that allows people to target a Khamenei in the bunker should be able to prevent such fiascos. This thing is China lining up with the lesson of Israel in that regard, but also United States. Now, where are the mistakes coming from in those systems? The same thing that Yair Lapid offered to not take into account accusations of sexual boundary violation before election to a role, is those rituals. And by the way, they can create a hacking of a system, whether it's in Israel, in China, in US, or in NATO. Um, more things related to that. I'm gonna have to track back certain things. Um, New York tried to meet the ambassador of Iran in the UN. United States had to interfere. Um, and Voice of Peace was patented. By the way, one of the rituals that were done around Israel was drawing a sheep which name was Shalom. Um, and then the antidote was the Voice of Peace sheep, which was a radio station, and basically, I think connected back then still with Iran in the time where they were not supposed to. Um, but then again, we weren't talking about Ayatollahs. Um, and then the card was switched to, oh, the people, we're not against the people, we're against the regime. Which Iran replied, and which I replied, abolish those rituals and and let's have some sushi. Um, I think my prediction is we won't be able to have a global village. There's actually a global village without abolishing those rituals. Do I know how to? I have no idea, but European Union accentuating an embargo on import from the Israeli settlements. Um, Again, European Union is preparing for the possibility of a sovereign declaration of independence of Palestine. And like I said, as when we talk about trade relations, it makes no sense not to. If there was an Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce, let me just check for how many years. Let's see if I get that information. IPCC, above 20 years. Was founded in the beginning of 2004. So 2004, Pluto would have been in Sagittarius, Neptune, Uranus. Probably both of them would have been in Aquarius. Um, so This means 24 that we. This means 22 years that we are trading with Palestine. What? Now the obvious question is what Palestine. Shout out to the Prophet, or if she's willing to do an episode on this, because that's an interesting topic. We and I've mentioned the fact that the Chuva initiative for water interdependence as basis for economic peace in the Middle East. First of all, we can see the embargo from the oil companies. And secondly, water element esoterically is relation. So we would need to have secure attachment and abolishing of all any type of transactional relations, particularly on an erotic diplomatic. And this is by the way what I refused to do also for NATO, because there were a lot of pressures. People saw that I liked the NATO chart, that it was interesting to me, but the interface is the same interface that I refuse to participate even on the most minuscule of jokes, let alone relations in the Israeli-Palestine Chamber of Commerce. And this is also something that is basically is the reason you didn't see me in the Haag already is that. Yes, write down and um, and this is where the certain, of course, naturally I had the privilege to, okay, and I use my privilege to discuss this topic so that it's a point of interference, so that people won't have to go through these things every time there is changing roles or important meetings. Um, because to get any good policy across is very, very difficult. With this type of, and this is also why I didn't go for certain roles in any of the parliaments, whether it's the Tweede Kamer or the Israeli parliament, because that's the thing that changes everything. Is that big shout out to Albina. Albina wanted to address politics, and her family is coming from Dagestan, which, if I would try to look in certain maps, would be called Russia, and then to Ukraine, and then think to United States. And she discussed the fact that of the interface between the energy companies or the business milieu and the challenge in being representative, um, perhaps the desire to not be a lobbyist in and to not join politics, to neither be a lobbyist or join politics. Um, Again, family is new money as a gas and media conglomerate, where Albina is the media part and her father is the energy part, and her sister, I think, was doing certain things in banking that was countering trafficking. I don't know what is the sister doing today business wise. Um, um, so um, mm, 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 mm. And this is also why I was I was weird and baggagey. Okay, so yeah, because um, it's also why I didn't join certain esoteric groups or intelligence groups of either. I woke up this morning. There was a joke in the ether today um, that I cannot say egregore because it's not one egregore, and that had to do with tackling an issue that's triggering multiple intelligences, esoterics, and then stretching my toes, Neil the Seal style, loaf on the beach, saying, "Hey, a father that does not defend their children from rape is not a father," which is a tautology. I mean, I'm right. I'm right. I mean, so. And I go back to being a toddler. Um, and the fact that it's acknowledging all those phases that it's a part of implementing what I'm talking about. Yeah. Now, of course, like I said, uh, many people didn't have the privilege to somehow be able to say no to, and it takes. Let's just say, I remember when there was Kasparov versus an AI, then that it was Kasparov beating an AI on chess, being able to portray all the various fallacies that they wanted to entrap me in to get me to be one of the people they point the finger at. And a lot of them had to do with dismantling the pointing the finger at while not enabling the abuse. Um, and I use my privilege to make people more aware so that the point of interference is um, point to let the teeth of the children no longer have to rot because their parents ate unripe fruit, to discontinuing those practices that interfere and permeate every legacy, every meaningful thing we want to do in the world. Every vision and every um, how should I say that? And every flexibility on a vision. Okay, we think about there is that alignment with having a vision and not having a vision that a director or a composer and I ran into that as a filmmaking student in high school. Um, of both, and it's holding both having a vision and not having a vision, grabbing the camera to film that shot just so it would be there for the editing room, and then being willing to sacrifice that shot for the sense of inclusiveness of my editor, and then essentially, yeah, having that shot in the movie the to the lack of satisfaction of the filmer, of the photographer, and that being my signature shot, which was kind of my Da Vinci move because it was a common girl looking into the camera when the camera is basically looking eyes into the camera on a profile face that's not tilted, and created an emotional trigger that overwhelms the screen and breaks the composition from knowing the convention. Um, and that was a controversial move, not just artistically, but also in terms of the relations with the team and the staff. So, knowing when to break the convention and what frame to fight on is something that um, that's always very challenging with those things, and I take advantage of that privilege and of that skill to to change the thing that changes everything, so that people won't have to go through these rituals that prevent them from having their own vision and legacy in tandem or in alignment with other people. Um, because until that doesn't change, no one will be able to have actual success that is fulfillment.